Rebecca Wilson, the founder and CEO of Starts at 60, and welcome to another Starts at 60 Masterclass. Today, we're bringing you a masterclass with our fantastic partner ANZ, and we're going to answer the Starts at 60 community's toughest questions about digital banking. All the things you can't find an answer to on Google that even some of the youngsters haven't figured out yet. Now, chances are if you're watching this event on Facebook or Zoom, you probably already know a fair bit about digital banking, or you already know how to use similar technology. But I know from the feedback we get on this from the Starts at 60 community that there's still plenty of questions that many over 60s have about the latest banking technology and how to use it safely and effectively, and maybe you just haven't asked. Right now, with many people having to stay home due to COVID-19, we felt these questions needed an answer. After all, it's much harder to self-isolate if you need to go to a branch to do your banking, or even if you've signed up for a digital banking app but are nervous about using it for all of the different things it can do for you. Luckily, I've got two amazing experts from ANZ here with me today who have all the answers. First of all, we've got Ben Anderson, who leads ANZ's digital customer experience team. He's responsible for how ANZ customers use digital channels, particularly the ANZ app, wherever they are and whenever they want. Plus, the app was recently named Money Magazine's Mobile Banking App of the Year. So well done, Ben and team. That is a real winner. And we have Linwen Connick, ANZ's Global Chief Information Security Officer. That is one title. Before joining ANZ, Linwen was the Chief Information Security Officer for the Australian Department of Defence. So she knows a thing or two about staying safe online. She even wrote Australia's cyber security strategy when Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister. That is an incredible track record, Linwen. So before we get started, I'm going to run through a bit of simple housekeeping. We've got about 40 minutes to hear Ben and Linwen's best tips and insights, then about 15 minutes to take your questions about anything and everything digital banking. We have the chat function running on Zoom, so that you can engage with each other while we're talking. We just ask that you be nice and respectful to each other. We shouldn't have to, but it is the internet. And on Facebook, you can comment in chat as usual. We're not taking questions from the chat though, only those submitted in the Q&A function via Zoom. And that's a great reason if you're watching on Facebook to sign up for these webinars directly, because that's where all of the questions come from. That function is at the bottom of your screen if you're watching on Zoom. So type in your questions and we'll do our absolute best to go get answers to them during our question and answer session. And if we can't address all of your questions today, we'll follow up the most pressing ones in articles on Starts at 60 over coming days. That's another great reason for you to make sure you're signed up as a member. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions we've got from our community members before we came here today. Linwen, how do you know when you're online shopping if a website is safe to use?
That's a great question. And I might just start by saying, before you even think about online shopping, one of the things that's really important to do is make sure the device or the laptop you're going to use is reasonably up to date. It's got good up-to-date software so that you know your system is secure. But then it's really important to make sure that if you're thinking of shopping online, that you're shopping from a reputable organisation, that you know them, that you know a little bit about them. You don't just click on a link that comes to you in an email or via social media. Great sale here, click on this link, buy something, because often that can be not from who you think it's from, or not from a reputable organisation. So do a little bit of research, Google the organisation you want to shop from, make sure it's someone you've heard of, you know something about. Often you can check any reviews about that organisation. And rather than clicking on a link to go shopping, the best thing is to type in the URL, the address of that site directly, because sometimes people will create a link, send you an email, looks like the organisation you think you want to shop from, but there's something slightly different and you don't notice that when you're clicking on the link. So if you type it in yourself, you get it right. That's a really, really important way to stay safe. Once you've done that and you're logged in, you look at the address. If it's got HTTPS, the S on the end means secure, or often what you'll see is a little padlock. That means you've got the secure connection with that site. And most reputable organisations that are doing business online will have that. That gives you an extra sense of security, that they're doing security properly and that you're really well protected when you're connecting with them and doing transactions with them. So that's a really important step to take place. You'll often notice that those sorts of organisations will also have those annoying questions where you have the grid, the catch grid, and it tells you, pick the squares with traffic lights or crossings, and I sometimes find those really hard and have to have a couple of goes, but they're doing that to make sure that it's not some automatic system that is trying to log into them. And so, they're taking security seriously when they do that as well. So those are really important steps. The other thing is thinking about how you pay. So it's often really good to use something like BPay, because you then know that you're connecting with the right organisation. You can't make a mistake in putting in your information about how you're going to pay, or PayPal or something like that is a real secure means of paying for those transactions with that organisation. So there's quite a lot of things you can do to make online shopping really safe. And I use online shopping all the time. You think I in my business, worried about security, might be concerned about that, but no, I think it's wonderful, particularly at the moment, to be able to do online shopping. You just have to take a few steps to make sure that you're doing it securely, and that's not that hard to do.
Yeah, look, those are really straightforward ways we can all be more security conscious. And I know we have the HTTPS on Starts at 60. So it's one of the things we stepped up to when they implemented that and put it in straight away. So thank you, Linwen. What about apps, Ben? Are there apps that offer extra levels of security when we're paying for things that people should know about and use?
Yes, there sure are, Rebecca. And Apple Pay is a great way of making payments. And it's really easy to set up in just a few simple steps. The big security benefit with Apple Pay is that your card details are never shared with an individual that you're paying or the internet site that you're paying on. So that's a really big benefit that we promote to customers. Look, Apple Pay requires you to have what we call Face ID. So we verify your face as a security layer, or Touch ID enabled in order to authorize payments. So that's a really big benefit from a security perspective as well. Now, to use Apple Pay, you need to firstly have an eligible device, which if you're an Apple user would be an iPhone or an Apple Watch. And then head across to the ANZ app and you can easily get set up in a few simple steps.
I could make you smile. My mum and I sat down a couple of months ago and we got all set up on our iPhones, and she got all the way to the watch and I didn't. And now she runs around waving her arm and going, I've got it. I don't even need to carry my phone. And it really is magical. So I guess that's just me giving you a bit of personal experience. And I take my phone everywhere, and that little glance at the bakery at your phone and a tap, and it's done. It's an amazing improvement to the way banking's been done. So you're right, it's much easier than we expected. Everybody's probably seen the signs for Apple Pay in the shops, but not everybody might actually know what it is. And I know when we were talking about it on the couch, we didn't realize just how easy it was to set up. Can you give us a quick rundown, Ben, of what it is?
Yeah, sure. So, as you just said there, you need an Apple Watch or an iPhone to firstly get set up. And from there, it's really like having a debit card or credit card on your device. And it's really that simple. If you're an Android user, Google Pay is essentially the same thing. Now, outside of that, we do have a range of contactless payment capabilities that we also support at ANZ. So we've got Garmin Pay, Fitbit Pay, Samsung Pay as well. So there's pretty much all options covered here when it comes to contactless payments. There is no cost, Rebecca, when it comes to setting up Apple Pay, which is a fantastic advantage as well. It comes with your account that you set up with ANZ. And I guess one of the other benefits that we often talk about here with contactless payments is that the need to carry cash becomes less and less. And that's a real consideration for many people at the moment, particularly from a hygiene perspective, when we think about handling cash, exchanging cash with one another, given COVID. And what I would also say, Rebecca, is, and I know I've done this myself recently, if you leave home without your purse or your wallet, but you do have your device, you can still easily make a transaction, which is really handy.
I went to the cafe with my phone and no wallet and no card the other day, and just tapped and paid for my breakfast, and it was fantastic. I'm in Queensland, by the way, so that probably makes all of our hard challenged Victorians feel horrible, but yeah, the phase when I was in lockdown and went to my first cafe and they said no, we're not taking cash, was that moment where we took on Apple Pay and went, it's time to really make sure we've got all the cashless stuff sorted out. So I think for everyone, this is a really big time of transition. Having that backup as your payment system, whether it's your primary or not, is a really good thing for peace of mind. But I'm going to flip back to Wi-Fi for a minute. Linwen, many of our grey nomads in our community sometimes use free Wi-Fi when they're traveling. Why is it best to avoid free Wi-Fi for transactions, financial transactions particularly?
There's a number of problems with free Wi-Fi, and one of the problems is that sometimes criminals can set up a Wi-Fi network that looks like it's a legitimate one, but they're actually using that to track your transactions as you're making them or steal your information. And so free Wi-Fi often doesn't have very good security. You know, it's made there to be public. So while it can be really tempting to use, particularly when you're traveling, it's not a good idea to use it for anything that's sensitive, you know, your banking or even sensitive information that you're sharing. You don't want to do that over free Wi-Fi. What I would do, and what I do when I'm out and about, is for something like banking, I use my phone with the phone app, 3G, 4G, to operate my internet banking app, or wait until you get home, or wait until you can log into Wi-Fi that you know is secure, you know, that has the right sort of security credentials around it from a reliable provider, which will usually require a password. And that's a much better way to do it than using free Wi-Fi.
Passwords. Now you've come to the hairy one. Obviously, passwords come hand in hand with digital security, but the need for so many passwords nearly kills me. It's just tempting to use one for multiple accounts. Linwen, how do we do that? Is it okay? Is there another way?
It's not okay. One of the most important things I tell people is don't share passwords between different accounts, different systems, particularly not a password that you're using, you know, to log into various information sites online and then use that same password for something that's really important, like, you know, banking or your work login or something like that. That's a really bad thing to do, because often those online sites don't have very good security. They don't store your password properly. If they get broken into, if they get hacked, someone can steal your password. And if you've used that elsewhere, that can be a real problem for you. So it's really important that you don't share passwords. And I know how hard this is for people. And we recommend people, you know, use a long, complex password too. And that can be difficult. So one of the things you can do is use a password manager. And if you don't know about password managers, Google it, look for recommendations. There's some really good ones there, particularly for that myriad of passwords that you have to have for all of those different online sites that you don't use very often. Really easy way to manage them with one really good, strong, long password. You might use a passphrase that's quite complicated, and you substitute letters and symbols in that passphrase. That then secures all of those other passwords that you need to use. And they're quite simple to use, really secure. Great way to stay much safer, but please don't share passwords between different sites. So many people have come unstuck with that. There's been so many breaches of, you know, some of those really poorly secured organizations, and people use that password across all of their different systems. The other thing that often surprises me is how many people use really poor passwords, you know, the word password 123. And you can actually Google the most common passwords, and that's, you know, and it's surprising how many people use password 123, or things that might be easily guessable, like their birth date or, you know, their name or those sorts of things. So you need a complex password, and it is hard. So I'd recommend using a password manager so you can do that securely, but don't share them between different sites.
I use a password manager, everybody. So, you know, get in there and use one. I won't tell you which one, but I'm sure our team can provide a list if people have questions. And I really encourage it. It also hands back from my phone to my computer and into my iPad. So if I change devices, and it changes a password on one device, I don't lose it. It talks to each other. So I must admit, when our tech team put me onto it, I breathed a sigh of relief at the challenges around passwords. So security layers and strong passwords, though, will not necessarily save someone from a scam when you're tricked into allowing someone access to your accounts or sending them money. And I have to admit, I've been tricked into giving people access. And I'm pretty digital savvy. I run an online business, and you know that can really be done by anyone. Can your bank help with this, Linwen? How can people be helped when they're tricked?
Well, the most important thing is, you know, prevention is better than cure. So really think about, if someone sends you an email or a message saying transfer some money or give me your personal sensitive information, just pause for a minute, think about it. Is that the right thing to do? And don't do it if you're not sure. Ask someone else, you know, talk about it, ring the organisation, but don't do it. If if you do, make a mistake, something goes wrong, report it straight away. Report it to your bank. You can get your credit card stopped. You can get, your system secured. It's really hard these days, of course, because transactions happen really quickly. So there's not a delay in time, but it's really important that you report it as soon as possible and make sure that you stop any further damage being done. The other thing, of course, that we really recommend people do is report it, because if it's a common scam that's going around and you report it to the authorities, and most organisations on their website, like we do, will have somewhere where you can report something that's suspicious, that then stops other people falling victim. So do the community good thing as well. Don't say, well, that was obvious, I didn't click on it, I didn't transfer some money, but there might be someone who does. And I think we all have that community responsibility to, if you see something that's problematic, report it so that it can be stopped and other people don't fall victim as well. If it has happened to you, don't be embarrassed, just make sure you tell someone straight away that it's happened, because, there are things that can be done to make sure that you're safe from any further problems or further issues.
I myself bought shoes off one of those accidental ads on Facebook recently, and I actually made sure I stood up in front of the whole team and said, I got done, right? All of us could easily get tricked. And I called my bank and ANZ and put all the processes in place and done that. But telling the team was actually something I felt really was important, because I think if we're humble and don't want to admit to things that go wrong, we can get ourselves in even more trouble by just people not realizing it's human to make mistakes. It's human to click on these things, and you just got to try and get the word out that people shouldn't. Is the most important. So look, it's interesting statistics, and we've all got to be conscious of online security. Ben, are there ways we can use the technology our banks offer to stay alert to scams or detect fraudulent activity on our accounts?
Yeah, look, there sure are, Rebecca, and I think this is one of the reasons, from my perspective, why digital banking is so great. It is so much easier to track your transactions in real time, as Lynn just said, via your ANZ app or internet banking. And customers really love this feature. We introduced this about a year ago, and what you can do is jump into your ANZ app. You can see transactions there made in real time. You can verify if the transaction was made by you by having a look at the things that surround the transaction. So where did you make the transaction? You can see that via a map. Which merchant did you make it with? And what was the business name that you made the transaction with as well? So there's some extra information that really helps you identify whether it was you or in fact someone on your behalf. And that's really important. Now, that information goes back roughly 2 years. If you want a little bit more information, you can look at statements in the app and internet banking as well. And that information goes back as far as 7 years. So if you're inclined, you can email them to yourself, those statements. You can print them out at home if you want to do that as well. Or you can simply just save them to your computer at home and have them there as your banking records. Just more broadly on the topic of digital security, Rebecca, I think one of the other things that customers really value in this context is being able to place a temporary block on your card if it's been misplaced, or in the worst case, potentially stolen. Now, what you can do is you will stop any further transactions on that card after the block is applied, which is really good. So you can try and find it in the meantime. Should you happen to actually lose the card, you can call ANZ via the ANZ app. And the benefits of doing that via the app as opposed to a standard call is that the consultant on the other end of the line will know who you are and what you're calling about, given you're already authenticated via our app. So that's one of the added benefits of getting in touch with us that way as well.
That's fantastic. I left my wallet on a plane one day, just fell out of my bag, and I was able to go as soon as I realized it. It took me about an hour to realize that I'd lost it somewhere, but I didn't know whether I'd be able to trust where I'd lost it. And I put a hold on it, and then the courier service from Qantas found it. They called me an hour later. They couriered it to Brisbane by Monday, and I didn't have to replace all the cards. So it was a fantastic feature to be able to put a hold on it rather than stop it altogether and wait 2 weeks and have all the challenges of replacing everything in your wallet. So yeah, I do have some good stories, not just bad ones. It's definitely, and I just hijacked your wonderful conversation about statements and people finding their transactions online. It's definitely quicker to scroll through my transactions and hunt for them on a paper statement, that's for sure. Lynwen, what else can people do to keep their accounts more secure? Because that's really what everybody wants to know.
There's a lot of really good information out there, including on the anz.com website. So you can go in there and have a look at our security pages, and it's not as hard as people think. People think that, you know, staying safe online, you know, implementing good cybersecurity must be really difficult and really technical, but it's not. It's actually, you know, the most important steps you can take are quite simple. And we've got on our website, you know, some really cool videos you can watch, but also links to other sites like cyber.gov.au, which is a great one. Stay Smart Online, which is another really good site, and you can actually subscribe to things like alerts that, you know, tell you what the current issues and problems are. But, you know, we try to make this simple for people because everyone thinks this is really hard. And so we have an acronym that we use that's PACT. We ask people to make a PACT to improve their personal security, their security online, because sometimes it's just hard to remember things. I find it easy to remember with the acronym. So the first letter in that acronym is P for PACT. And that's about pausing before you share personal information, pausing before you click on a strange looking email, pausing before you send someone money because they've sent you an email saying transfer money to this account. Just pause. If it doesn't look right, it probably isn't. Ask someone, go back, ring up the company that you think might have sent you the email. You know, you could look up their number independently and find out if that's really what happened. That's a really important thing that everyone can do. It's not a hard thing to pause before you do something that you might regret later. The second step in that acronym, A for activate, as I said at the beginning of the session, you know, activate automatic updates on your phone, on your iPad, on your laptop. It's always important to have that latest version of software because new problems are being discovered every day in software that criminals can exploit. And so if you've got the latest version, you're really well protected. And you don't want to have to remember to do it. You want it to happen automatically. That's really, really important. So activate that. The third thing to do is to call out anything that is suspicious, as I said before, and report it to the authorities, report it to the organisation that you think might have sent it. You know, is this, you know, my bank sent me something saying enter your password here. That doesn't seem right. Go back to your bank and say someone sent me something that they shouldn't. Sorry, I got the A wrong. The A was for activate two-factor authentication. Sorry, I'm not very good at my acronyms some days. A is for, and we talked before about having, you know, complex passwords and never reusing your password. One of the things you can do to not only rely on a password is to have a second factor of authentication, like a SMS code that you use before you're making a large transaction. You can set that up with your bank, or even on your email, you can have it set up so that you don't rely on just the password, you have a second factor of authentication. So sorry, I got that wrong with my acronyms, that was the A. The last part of our acronym is T for turning on automatic updates. So make sure that you've always got that latest version of software. So PACT, easy to remember as long as you don't mess it up like I just did. Pause, activate two-factor authentication, call it out if it's wrong and make sure someone else doesn't fall victim to the same problem, and turn on your automatic updates so you've always got the latest version of software so that you're most as secure as you can be. I would add a couple of extra things that it's really important to do. One is to always have a backup. You want to make sure you've got your photos backed up so that if anything goes wrong, that you don't lose them, whether it's a cyber, attack or even just something goes wrong with your laptop. Really good to have them backed up and your systems backed up so you can recover from any problems that you might have. And if you can, use some additional security software. And often that comes for free with your operating system on your laptop, or you can buy it quite cheaply. On those websites I mentioned, there's lots of links to tell you what sort of antivirus software, for instance, you might want to put on your laptop, just to give you a little bit of extra protection. If you do those things, it's not as hard as people think to really be secure online. And the most important thing is that, we think about what we're doing and really think about security, because it starts with us to do the right thing. It's not complex technical security measures that you have to put in place. It's really just thinking about what are the things I can do to stay safe online and ensure that I don't fall victim like some other people might have.
Yeah, you really have to think sometimes about the text messages that come into your phone that have a link on them, or the nondescript things that happen. And I found myself deliberately pausing and going, wow, that looks like something really important and urgent that I must click on. No, pause. If it's really important and it doesn't have a brand on it, it shouldn't be clicked on. So, it is that pause that can often stop you making a good mistake. And I've made my fair share of clicking fast on on those things. And you know, at Starts at 60, we're very cognizant of the Scamwatch website. We keep bringing our community the news from Scamwatch whenever we see something that people might need to know. It's very important that people see the real scams, not just the ones that go by urban myth around everybody, but the ones that are truth out there too. And that's where you find them all. So now on to our next question. Some of our community members have older relatives who just do not want to give up cash though. And Ben, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure, Rebecca. And look, I think it's absolutely a valid concern. And moving from cash to digital banking and to Apple Wallets and Apple Pay, like we've just spoken about, can be a big jump for many people, particularly if you think in the current environment, how many people are self-isolating, and you could feel as though digital banking is being bestowed upon you a little bit, I think, in many respects. So I think it's an absolutely valid concern. If you think about how we've evolved over time, though, it does put it into context. So we have, over time, evolved the way we do store and exchange value. We've had things like the stock market, which has evolved into things like wire transfers, and now we're in the digital banking era. And increasingly, more and more, we're going mobile. Everything that you want to do with your finances, you can pretty much do on your mobile device. There we go. And so I think that's a really important point, and we can embrace that. And one of the ways that ANZ is trying to help customers embrace that is with a money-back guarantee. And so you can feel comfortable that you can make transactions on your card without fear of being kind of compromised by a fraudster. And what we mean by that is, should you notice something that's a little bit suspicious in terms of a transaction that was not made by you, provided that you didn't share your PIN or your password with someone else that you shouldn't, ANZ will reimburse you. And so I think those sorts of things are really comforting when it comes to talking about or having a conversation about starting the journey with digital banking and getting set up for the first time.
That is a pretty generous guarantee and great peace of mind for new users.
Yeah, no, it sure is. I mean, I think you don't get that kind of guarantee with cash. Generally, if it's lost, it stays lost. And so it's a real benefit of moving to digital.
That is terrific.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to the real nitty gritty. The fact that ANZ and other banks are so vigilant in monitoring accounts for suspicious activity makes some of our community worried that their bank is watching their every move. Linwen, is that really a concern?
No, not at all. I mean, we take privacy very seriously. We're required by the law to take privacy very seriously, but we're watching for malicious transactions. So we're not watching people's every move, but we are making sure that we look for things that are suspicious on our networks, which is quite a different thing, really. So I think people can be really reassured that, you know, we're very careful. We take very seriously people's privacy, and we're required to by law. And there's a lot of organisations that watch to make sure that we're doing that.
Oh, that's good to hear. We mentioned Apple Pay before. It's just really quick revisit on that before we wrap up, because it's becoming much more common. And Ben, someone accidentally can they make a payment just by waving their phone around near a contactless reader? Tell us about how it actually works and how hard is it to make a mistake?
Yeah, and look, so you absolutely can't do that. You can't unknowingly make a payment just by walking past a terminal reader. As we spoke about before, you need to actually verify a transaction with your face or your fingerprint, and those things are pretty hard to do, you know, without you actually having the device. So it's not actually possible.
Yeah, you look, you tap, you look again, don't you? It's a very serious process that's still very easy. What happens if you lose your phone, Ben? Can someone just pick it up and use it like a debit card because I've got Apple Pay or my banking app on it?
Again, I think this is very unlikely. If you've already taken the right security precautions that we've spoken about a few times in terms of setting up the second factor authentication, you know, it'd be pretty hard for someone who's a complete stranger to get access to your device initially with the two-factor authentication already enabled and then attempt to make a payment on your behalf. So for those reasons, it's not something that's likely to happen. However, in the unlikely chance that it does happen, you can easily deregister a device, and you can do that via the ANZ app or online banking. Deregistering a device actually removes access to your card as well as your account. And from the device that you've lost, which would be the device that you've had lost or stolen. Now, in that case, if you're using Apple Pay and your physical card is lost or stolen, ANZ will actually take the steps to place a block on that card, which will then automatically suspend the card as well. So there's an extra step there that the bank takes on the customer's behalf. And that's a really good thing to actually give you confidence that things are kept safe while we look to reissue you with the card.
That's terrific. Thanks, Ben. What else can banking customers do to make sure that if their phone is lost or stolen or used fraudulently, that their bank is able to act quickly?
Yeah, well, one of the things we always recommend to customers is that you keep your contact details up to date should the bank need to get in contact with you urgently in this particular case. So you can head across to the ANZ app or internet banking to what we call the profile section. Within that section, you can actually update your name and your contact details, including your phone number, in a few simple steps. So that's what we recommend customers to do.
No need for long hold queues for that anymore. Isn't that nice?
That's right. That's right.
Really good advice, Ben. Now we've got some time to answer some of the questions that everybody has been sending in, and we've been flooded with questions, guys, while you've been talking. So yay. Well done, everybody out there in the community. Thank you for engaging so beautifully with the topic. It's such an important topic. My first question is for Ben. What happens if I use the wrong account numbers or press the wrong button when I'm using digital banking? Can I get my money back?
Yeah, this is a great question, Rebecca. And I think it's hard to avoid making a mistake. I think we've all probably been in this situation at some point. Look, with ANZ and digital banking, we've tried to make it as mistake-proof as possible. We've actually implemented a piece of technology called PayID. Now, what PayID actually allows you to do is to pre-enter the payment recipient details into the app prior to making the payment. And so what that actually does is it allows you time to triple check that you're paying the right person. So it could be your friend, a family member, or the gardener, could be anyone. And you just want to make sure that you're entering their details correctly before you actually process the payment. Now, when the time comes to making the payment, the benefit of PayID, it really sets it apart from any other payment type. We, as an industry, a banking industry, guarantee that you'll get the payment in about 60 seconds. So it's a type of payment that is becoming more commonplace as you look across the industry now. There's a lot of information as well on anz.com about how to get set up with the PayID for the first time. So I'd encourage people to jump on there and have a look.
That is fantastic. I've got a follow-on question for you now, Ben. From one of our viewers who said she did make a mistake when paying a utility bill and was told by her bank, which isn't ANZ, that it'd take up to a month for the money to be credited back to her account. How long does it normally take to correct such a transaction, assuming you tell your bank immediately that you've made a mistake?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I think in this situation, it really depends on the bank that the utility company banks with in the first instance. And generally speaking, these types of situations take about 2 weeks to really close down. What it involves is obviously the business to get sure that they can track down where the transaction has gone and what's actually happened there. You know, what I would say though, when it comes to mistaken payments, the good thing to know from a consumer's perspective is that all businesses that participate in and around sending and receiving electronic payments are governed by what we call the e-payments code. And that basically gives you a level of confidence that as a consumer, you are protected, you do have rights, and you do have some guidelines to follow in the event that a situation like this occurs.
That's good to know. Linwin, the next question is for you. Is it really okay to tap my card, or should I only do transactions that need a PIN as well for security reasons?
No, I think it's certainly okay to tap your card. It's, you know, there's a limit to how much money will be paid when you tap your card. But it's been talked before about things like Apple Pay on your phone. That for my children, for instance, I don't give them a card. They have Apple Pay on their phone because then they need to have Face ID or Touch ID on their finger before that transaction will go through. So that's what I tend to do, is use those sorts of services rather than a card. But it's certainly okay to use a card for those smaller transactions.
I never thought of calling Apple Pay more secure than a card. That's terrific. That's really, really good way of thinking about it. It takes you to use it to realize just how secure it feels. One for Linwin now. When you say don't use Wi-Fi, does that mean I shouldn't use the data on my phone when I'm out of access of my online account? Or do you just mean free Wi-Fi like you see in a cafe or library?
I mean free Wi-Fi. So those free Wi-Fis that pop up on your phone or your laptop, and there's no password required, and you don't know who's provided them. It's not something that's provided by a legitimate organisation. You can certainly use the data on your phone, so that's a good secure way to do those sorts of internet banking transactions or anything else that's a little bit sensitive. Of course, sometimes you might have limited data on your phone, so you don't want to be downloading a movie on your phone. But certainly, you're not going to use that much to do something like some internet banking from your mobile data, and that's a really good way to do it if you don't have a reputable Wi-Fi connection to use when you're travelling.
Yeah, that's good. My next one's for Ben. Sometimes a shopkeeper will take your card off and hold it on the card reader themselves or take it away. Ben, is it safe for them to do this, or is it a security risk?
Well, look, ideally, you'd always maintain control of your card and keep the card with you when you're actually making a transaction, Rebecca. But I think, we've all probably seen it in the past where you haven't quite got the right connection to the card reader, or it hasn't quite worked the first time, and the shopkeeper might be trying to help you make that transaction go through. And look, so that does happen. But, what I would say on top of that is make sure that you try and keep it on yourself, but also protect your PIN as well. Your PIN is a security authentication method that needs to stay with you. So try and make sure that that's covered.
On a broader topic, Ben, do you think the strong trend away from cash is going to continue after COVID? I don't even think I have $1 in my wallet, just to make you giggle. I think it's all in my devices, and my children are very horrified that they can't get tuck shop money out of my wallet.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think I'm the same. So I think Australians were probably moving away from cash even before COVID struck, and I think the decline started previously on this topic. So I think that absolutely there is a shift. There are many practical benefits, as I see it, to moving towards a cashless society. It's cleaner, as we spoke about earlier at the start of the session, but also you just don't need to carry around the cash and the coins, which is a huge benefit.
It's certainly cleaner in this environment. More questions for Linwin. Can we trust a password manager? Are they secure? Especially when we hear about a lot of big organizations being hacked and everyone's passwords published.
It's a really good question. Password managers, reputable password managers, and I said you should Google them and read the reviews. This is their business. So they take security very, very seriously. And really it's a much safer way to do business than using poor passwords or sharing passwords between systems. So, most of us trust them these days. You might, if you're really concerned, you might want to use password managers for the more general things that you do, but keep a few of your accounts where you actually just say, for my internet banking, I want to remember a complex password that I'll use for that. But for all of these other websites that I have to log into online, I'll use a password manager for all of those, because it means then I don't have to remember 100 different passwords. I just have to remember 2 or 3, one for, my internet banking, one for my email, and then one for my password manager that does everything else. So if you're concerned, that's a really good way to, make sure that you can have your cake and eat it too. So you can get the password manager, but you can still keep separate those things that are really sensitive or important and use a strong complex password that you only know for those things.
That's really sensible. Another one for Linwin. This viewer says, and I actually can relate to this one, I've been doing internet shopping, so I've had a lot more Australia Post deliveries of late. However, I received an SMS telling me they'd tried to deliver a parcel on the link and to click a link for more details. It was a scam, but it had all the Australia Post logos, things like that. Should I never click on links? And I've probably had 2 or 3 of these in the last couple of days, so I can completely relate. And I don't know whether I'm missing out on clicking on things that I should be, but I'm just not clicking. So tell us, Lynn, when I want the advice from the expert.
It's a really hard one, particularly if you happen to be, victim of that scam at the time when you're expecting a parcel to come. So, you need to do what you can to verify whether you think that really is a legitimate link. And if it comes to you via an email, you can often look at who sent it. And if you've had other emails from Australia Post, check that it's the same email address, not something that's spelt wrongly or looks a bit strange or is configured in a different way. If in doubt, don't click on it, would be my advice. Ring Australia Post, find some other way, go into their website of verifying. So always be cautious, because it's a really sad fact that criminals are preying on people, particularly at this very difficult time. When we've got a lot of people worried about the pandemic, one of the scams we see is people send out emails or messages that say, click here to find out more about COVID-19, what's happening at the moment. So, they're preying on people knowing what they're doing at the moment. They know a lot of people are doing online shopping at the moment, so those sorts of scams about your parcel arriving is more common. So I would just advise, have a look at it, scrutinise it. If it doesn't look quite right, maybe find another way of finding out where your parcel is, not clicking on that link. Don't do it if you're not sure, would be my advice.
Yeah, pause is the one, isn't it? Pause.
Pause, that's right. Find another way of verifying information.
Very good, thank you. Another one on a similar topic is when somebody asks you to give them remote access to your computer so they can fix it, is it okay to do this?
I wouldn't normally do that, no, unless you know who it is. So, for instance, if you're at work and it's your IT support person and you know them and you can verify who they are, maybe. Anyone else, I would be very suspicious about doing that. So it really depends. And once again, it's all these things, you've got to use some judgment. If you've rung up the IT support company that you get a service from, they're about to dial in and want to take access to your computer, then you can probably make a risk-managed decision that that's okay. If you're just doing something online and someone sends you a message saying, we've noticed there's a problem with your computer, click here to let us take control and fix it for you, no. So, you have to do a little bit of checking sometimes. If you're confident that the request is coming from someone you've asked to help you, then it's not such a problematic thing. But you need to do a little bit of checking sometimes and just validate who it's coming from. Why? Is it something you expected? Is there a way of double checking that it's really them? And then it's okay to do. And I've done that when I've needed support, but I do a few checks. I don't just take it straight up and say, this is okay. This is the person I expect to be taking control over my computer.
Yeah, absolutely. And never respond to those people that call you and ask you to do things on your computer. They're not the right right thing at all.
Not at all. They're usually scams.
Yes, we have a fun game we play at home on that now. When the phone rings. So my elderly neighbour, and this is another question for Linwin, won't use digital banking on, say, an Apple Watch because they're worried about someone in the street forcing them to do a transaction, like being robbed, but digitally. How would you respond to this kind of worry?
I can understand those concerns, and people, do get worried, particularly when they're older, but I think it's quite unlikely that someone would be able to do that and to actually authorise the payment as well. I've never heard of it happening. So I really don't think, of all the things that I would be worried about and the ways that people could take advantage of you, I think that's very unlikely to be a concern. And the advantages you get and the security you get with, that sort of capability, I think far outweighs any potential concern, given there's all sorts of other ways that people could cause issues if they wanted to.
Well, look, thank you so much. I think this kind of information is so incredibly helpful. I'm afraid it's time for the event to come to a close, and we've made it through to most people's questions, I think, which has been, you know, I'm really grateful for. Thank you today for everything, Ben and Linwin. I'd like to thank ANZ and Ben and Linwin for joining the Starts at 60 community in our masterclass on digital banking. It really has been exciting to have you here and answer these hard questions. I think people didn't even know they needed this information until they got it. It's so helpful. To everyone in our audience, thank you so much for listening in.
It's been great to be here, and I hope it's been helpful.
Thank you for coming. To everyone in our audience out there today on Facebook and Zoom, and in the replays as well, as this gets circulated through our community later, thank you so much for listening in. We're very keen for you to be able to share this event with a friend. This is something that people who are not as technically capable might really need as well. So we're going to provide the recording to all Zoom registrants via email, and we'll also be sharing it on Facebook later today. So look out for the video, everybody, and it'll also be in the Starts at 60 email newsletter. So be sure to sign up if you aren't already, and take care and stay safe, everybody.